Hello! It's nearly the end of the year now, which is a good time to look back and try to learn something from the past experiences. What I want to do with you now is to look at 5 of my photo fails of the year. In my opinion, it's always good to regularly look back at your best and also your worst photos of the year or even a longer period of time, because both the successes and the failures can contain valuable lessons. And what I want to do now is I look at my 5 of my photo fails and I try to extract some lessons for the future from them. And I'll show you both compositional and technical failures. So let's start. I want to start with this photo which I took on Malta, where if you have seen my last video, I didn't have much good weather conditions, but on this particular evening when I was at Gnechna Bay, I had perfect conditions, though a beautiful sky, beautiful sidelight, and the subject here got some very nice colors by this light, very nice structures here in the rocks, and it's basically a beautiful view. And I wanted to photograph this, but the problem I now have with this photo is somehow I completely screwed up the foreground here. So what I tried to do here, I wanted to include some foreground to point the viewer into the scene, as I often do. And if you're shooting wide angle lens, this is a good idea to provide some anchor point where the viewer can get into the frame, so to say. And what I did here though, I included a very distracting foreground. So the main subject is basically this fortress-like structure here in the middle of the frame, and there's also the beautiful light. And this is the characteristic part about this bay, and this is what I wanted to photograph. And this rock here, although it kind of points into the scene, it's much too big now. And on the little camera display, I kind of didn't notice it that much, and that's a problem you often have if you're looking at the little display on the back of the camera. Sometimes elements don't look that bad or that big as if you're looking at them on the screen or if you print them large. So you always have to think about how does it look if you print this 1 meter wide, and then you have a huge, nearly negative space here, because also it's quite dark down here. Also on this side I have nothing to balance it. So here the slopes are just going down. There's no rock on this side which could balance this. So if I look at this photo and I think about some scales, so I have some very heavy object on the left side and not much to balance it. So it completely unbalances the composition, and I could crop in a bit, and this is also what I tried, but even then, if I crop in, the composition gets a bit more balanced, but I still get blocked by this element, so I don't get the access to the main subject. So the lesson here is always think about what is your main subject and make sure that the other elements you include in the frame support this main subject, but don't block it or distract from it like I have here. So this is nearly blocking it, although I was careful not to have an intersection here. But I'm very sad about this, because afterwards the light was gone, and the last evening, I didn't get such nice light, so this complete opportunity was wasted. And let me quickly show you another example which I also took this evening, but unfortunately not with this nice light, but just to give you a comparison. So this is the image I took after sunset, and you see the image before, this is where I was standing, and I was shooting in this direction, having those rocks big in the frame. And now I went a little further up, placing those rocks to the side, which I think works much better here and leaves also the view to the main subject unobstructed. I don't have a foreground now, but for this subject I think I don't need one. And this image feels much more balanced, and if only I had the light here from the side, I think this would have been the right photo to take. But as it is, the opportunity is gone, and that's why I see this evening as a failure. I think I can still make something out of this photo, but yeah, I could have gotten much more if I had been a little more deliberate about scouting the area. So that's always the problem if you arrive late, which I did. You sometimes settle for a composition which is not ideal, and the better compositions are further up or further down the path, and you find them just when the light's already gone. The second photo I'm showing you is from the seashells, and I was trying to photograph those beautiful palm trees which are the main subject, and I was using those rocks here and trying to point the viewer into the scene. But my problem with this photo now is I have a foreground, I have a middle ground, but I don't have a background, and I'm missing depth here. And another thing, while I completely focused here on the main subject, I don't have much context. So there's the ocean on this side here. I completely excluded it, which I think was a very bad decision. And honestly, I don't know why I did it. Maybe the light wasn't too good on this side. I don't know. But as it is, this image is missing context and also depth. So the lesson here is also identify the main subject, same as in the first example I showed you, and I think I did. So the main subject here were those palm trees, but also provide context or supporting elements and interest for the viewer. And interest is missing here. So I have those rocks, I have the palm trees, and basically behind me the waves were crashing on those rocks. There was a lot of atmosphere, but this atmosphere is not in this photo. And that was a very bad decision, and I'm again a little bit sad because I can't go back and reshoot this. But I can show you an example which I took the day earlier, where I think I did this much better. So it's a similar subject. Let's quickly switch over. So this photo was taken just maybe 500 meters further down the coast, and again here I have the palm trees and the rocks, which are the main subject, and I have beautiful side light. But what I also have here, besides foreground, middle ground, I have background here, so the viewer can follow the coast here and look into the background. So I think this is much more interesting. Also, I have those waves crashing on the rocks, so much more atmosphere in this image. And I think something like this would have also worked on the other cove, but for some reason I wanted to be clever with the composition, do something different. I don't know. But the lesson here, always think about depth and also context and what could support your compositions or your main subject. And for this photo here, I think it worked. For the other, it didn't. Next is a photo I took in Vietnam, and it's again an example where I completely screwed up the composition in my opinion. So this evening I was out looking for something or some composition to photograph those rice paddies, which were just a few hundred meters from our homestay, and as I walked towards them, it suddenly began to rain very heavily, and also the sun peeked out under the clouds and created this beautiful light. And I became very hectic, running around like a maniac looking for some composition, and after a very short time I settled with this one. And what I was thinking is that this line here is kind of pointing towards the sun, and I thought this would work, but in my opinion it doesn't. So the composition is not very balanced. So I have the bright sun here, I have a lot of empty space here, some empty space here. This one here feels unbalanced. So all in all, I don't like this composition. But why did I photograph it in the first place? And the reason is I was too hectic and I wasn't paying attention to the composition as I usually do. So it was raining, I was holding an umbrella, I was running around, just wanted to quickly find something because I thought the light would be gone in a few seconds. So I settled for this one, which already when I took the photos, I wasn't happy about. And there, in that instant, I should have stopped photographing it and should have looked around a bit more, because to be honest, if there's nice light or beautiful light and I take a photo without a good composition, I don't need to take a photo at all, because I won't process this photo. I likely delete it later, but it's good I kept it around so I can show you a little failure here. So for the future, I will always try to focus on the composition, and yeah, the worst that could have happened here is really, okay, the sun would have been gone, the light would have been gone, and I wouldn't have found a good composition in time, but the outcome would have been the same. Here I have a photo which I don't like, which I will not process. The other outcome would have been, I wouldn't have taken a photo at all because I didn't find a composition, but basically the same, and the chances would have been higher in the other case, because often there is a good composition and you just need a little more time to find it. And yeah, just after the light was gone, I found it. So let me show you. So this photo here, which I also showed in my vlog from Mukang Chai, this has a much better composition. I have here this leading line, I have this leading line. The sun would have been here, so this would have worked much better. Also here I have different areas, nice separation, and yeah, had I just stepped maybe 20 meters to the side, taking a little longer, I would have found this composition also in time, because the other photo, this was the leading line from the other photo, so not too far. And I got hectic. I didn't take my time to compose the shot, and I settled for something mediocre, just for the sake of taking a photo of the light. But this is not enough in my opinion. So as in another video I explain, there are 3 ingredients, and those include light, subject matter, and also very important, the composition to tie it together. And yeah, this I was completely neglecting here, and I'll try in the future to spend a little more time again to find a good composition. This is again a photo I took on the seashells, and at first you might ask why this is a failure, because I had such beautiful light here in the sky, and also the subject matter with those rocks and the ocean isn't too bad. But when I look at this photo now, somehow it doesn't feel right, or it doesn't feel like the best I could have gotten from that evening, especially with those beautiful cloud patterns here. So I have some diagonal cloud patterns here, and I should have looked for something to mimic it, so for a foreground which also contains some diagonals. But instead I settled on this foreground, which by itself looks very nice. So the patterns here and the structures look beautiful, and for some scenes this would have been the perfect foreground. But for this scene or this sky, I think it doesn't fit, because there are too many structures while the sky looks relatively clean. And also the rock here in the middle, it doesn't contain too many structures, so there's no visual harmony between the elements in the frame. So the sky, the middle ground, I think they work together, but then we have this foreground which kind of doesn't fit into it. And that's important, and that's kind of the lesson for me here, to spend a little bit more time, and this is also what I usually try to do when scouting a scene. So looking for different foreground elements, so you can then be flexible when the light starts, the sky starts to burn. Sometimes you have many structures in the sky, then you likely would want a foreground also with similar structures. But like here, when I have those diagonal shapes, I should have looked for a foreground which also has such diagonals to better repeat the patterns, and this would have created much more harmony in the image. I can show you an example where I think this worked much better. Let's head over to another image. So this is also a photo I took on the seashells, and I don't have the beautiful light I had in the other one. It's more like a stormy sky, but the sky is also similarly clean as in the other one. So I have diagonals pointing into the frame and not too much structure. But for this image it works much better, because also the foreground is quite clean. Also I have several diagonals which were created by the water rushing back into the ocean. Also this rock which I placed, well, I didn't place it, but I composed it, that I also have those diagonals, and everything points kind of into the frame, and everything harmonizes with each other in my opinion. And while this image works, the other one, the harmony didn't come together in a way that it felt right. And maybe I'll process the other one because the light was so nice, but for this year, I think this year is the better image, although I don't have such a nice sky as the other one. So the final failure here, I think many of you will already know it because I have a separate video on this, and for a change, it's not a compositional failure, it's a technical failure. And as I show in all its length in the other video, is I had a tilt-shift lens rented here from Canon, and I was using it the first time this evening. I just picked it up maybe 3 hours before that, and the image is very soft in the upper part here, while it's still perfectly sharp in the rest of the image. And the problem here is I was too confident with the equipment, although I had just gotten it. So usually such technical issues are never a deal for me. When I'm shooting with my Canon, with the lenses I know what to do to get a photo sharp. And for this year, I just checked those areas on the camera display. I was checking that they were sharp, which they were, and then I took the next photos, and completely neglected the upper part here. And especially with new equipment, it's important to do more tests before, and if, as you don't have time for it, then at least check the complete frame when you take the photo. And I'm glad I had another day there and I could retake this photo, even got a better sky that evening. But otherwise this would have been quite a bummer, because I rented this lens and then I completely screwed this opportunity here. So don't get too confident. So that's quite usual if you're gaining experience with the equipment, take a lot of photos. You sometimes do a lot of stuff automatically, so you don't have to think about it. But if you get new equipment or shooting with at a new location, you always have to be a little bit more careful, I think, and take a little bit more time to make sure that everything works from a technical standpoint, so to say. And that's a lesson for me for the future. So if ever I shoot with new equipment, I'll make sure to test it much better before. Even if I just have a few hours, I could have spent a little more time here, and also could have just checked this upper part also on the display of a camera. I would have instantly seen that this is wrong and could have done some focus taking as I did the following day. So I hope you could get some valuable information out of this video, and if so, please make sure to like and subscribe. Also, before I forget it, I wish all of you a Merry Christmas.